Okay, just to take you through some of my thought process so far. No compression on the snare yet. I'm only compressing stuff just when it's not very consistent in terms of dynamics, frankly. The kit was a bit of a moving target. Still is a little bit of a moving target in terms of level, but it's a bit more under control. So it's heading in the correct direction, I reckon. The snare, it's not that variable in terms of level at the moment. Of course, you could look at the Pro Tools session for this file to see what sort of moments might need some gain reduction kicking in. I'll show you that now, for example. So there's a transient in the snare coming up here. So what I'll do is I'll loop across that. I mean, this is basically asking the drummer to give us a range of dynamics on the snare during a line check. And what I'm going to basically say is we want some leveling control. So when it goes for this sort of bar start moment here, we want gain reduction coming in and taking out some of that extra level, which, okay, we want to keep the thing exciting and everything, but we can't have every instrument jumping out at the start of bars because the thing's just going to get too loose and out of control. We have to put some processing in place at this point so that we got automatically some control going on when the band all play together. So I'm going to leave that looping across that, which is, as I say, effectively asking the drummer to give us a range of dynamics, give us some loud and some softer bits, basically. And then we're listening to that loop, and we're seeing if we get gain reduction on that bigger moment, but not on other moments. So I'm not using compression here to change it sonically. I don't mind the sound of the snare at the moment, apart from it's a bit dry, but I can put it in a bit more of a real space with some time delay effect, some reverb, basically. The thing I want to do really is level it, is take out any moments that stand out as sudden and unnecessarily sudden. That's the stuff I'm doing on the dynamic processor on the input channel here. So here we are with the snare top. So I'll just take you through a little bit about what I'm usually doing with compression on input relative to group. Well, on the input, usually I'm bringing it under dynamic control. So if I've got some moments like we were looking at there with the snare that are very loud in comparison to moments just before, I mean, we want to keep some of the dynamics, but I can't have everything jumping out throughout the track. I've got to bring some things under some control because there's a lot of inputs all coming at us in real time, and we don't get to go back over it again and improve it a second time round in a live show, except from the show the next night, of course. So I'm usually using inputs to get some dynamic control, to do a bit of leveling, and then if I want to change sonics, improve the, let's say, fatness of the shells of the drum kit, then that's more really what I'm doing on the groups. Some consoles allow us a choice of group, a choice of compressor circuit, digital emulation of a compressor circuit, some of which are quite aggressive, for example, and can achieve a sharper sound, for example, and sometimes you can cycle through those compression circuits. On this desk, it's a professional but start-out price point, so you don't get to change that circuit. So it is the same compressor on the groups as in the input channels. But what, as I say, on some consoles I might look to do on the groups is adapt the sonics to what I want to fit the track. But as I say, on this desk, we would have to add some plugins to this desk, which I'll do a video in the future about that, just for your own interest, what you can do in terms of external inserts into this desk. But essentially, I'm doing some leveling at input, and I'm only really doing just a little bit more leveling at the group as well. Just basically, I'm trying to do as much as I can at the input, but then if I listen to the two kick channels together, after I've done the line check at the input, and I think, you know what, that kick still moves around as it's too variable, and it's standing out, and it doesn't need to stand out because it's the backbone of the track. It should be really solid. Then I'm doing a little bit more gain reduction here. Actually, in this case, I've ended up with quite a bit of gain reduction to level this thing out further. So I've got it a bit clamped. Because when we were listening to the reference track before, it's pretty clamped as a studio production. This kind of music is loose in areas, it's loose on the guitars, it's loose on the vocal, but the backbone of the track needs to be pretty solid. So that's why I've ended up with a reasonable amount of gain reduction going on here, down for up to 6 or so dB worth of gain reduction. It's probably more than I would usually look to do on the groups, but if I feel I can get away with it, if it's still relatively transparent and it's not spoiling my intended drum and snare sound, then I'll go with that. So that, again, usually more corrective stuff on inputs and more creative stuff on groups. Usually that's how I roll with it. I'm doing a little bit of creative stuff because I'm pushing the dry a little bit in there, so it is sounding somewhat different than what it did when it was just raw by this point. Moving on. This is a good moment to use that DCA, for example. Think the kick's a bit loud relative to the snare. Ooh, could just tuck it in on the DCA and rebalance the whole kick to snare sound quite quickly.